All right, start with
Yeah.
your names and
Oh.
birthdays.
Given name is Nicholas Paul Joseph Grinjevic. Born March 2nd, 1933. And you just kicked the camera, Max. Whoops.
Gloria Jean, I believe my confirmation name was Antoinette Garibo Grunjevic, born November 13th, 1935.
Oh, wow.
All right, so why don't you both tell us about traveling across the United States?
Oh, see, that's one that I haven't thought about much.
Just answer it.
You were there.
It was the bicentennial year, and Ron, whose name was that at the time, said it's B-U-Y, bicentennial. We loaded the trailer, but he wouldn't let us take too much, so we didn't bring too much. And then we bought and bought and bought, because they had a lot of big sales back there, and they had factory outlets, and we bought and bought and bought and bought more. And that was the bicentennial year, so we went to 4th of July. There were 1 million people, $1 million worth of fireworks from France. And
Where?
And Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
And how long was a line of cars? How many miles? Miles and miles and miles, and lots of cars, lots of people.
That was, they were coming in, we were going out. We were leaving Washington, D.C. as they were coming in. And we traveled for about 5 miles. We saw cars bumper to bumper.
Wow.
And
Now, we later went onto an army base. Her uncle got us onto there, and that's where we saw the fireworks from. And we had no trouble getting in and out. But we were not right where everybody else was.
Yeah.
Now, we were blessed by God all the way. We had 4 days with rain. 1 day, a lot of rain. The other 3 days, not much. We were traveling in between storms. There was a storm ahead of us, and there was a storm behind us. And we were just in this little envelope in between the storms, no matter which way we went, until we got to the East Coast, and that's where we hit the rain.
We were gone 57 days. We traveled 11,000 miles. We went to how many states?
37 states,
And-
one province in Canada.
Which province?
Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada.
Ontario.
My aunt was 95 at the time, and Paul visualized this little nerdy old bent over. She got on our Airstream trailer and jumped right off, and she was telling us,
It was about 3 foot from the step down.
Yeah.
About 3 foot, and she jumped down
and she
at
said,
95.
she had to go to a funeral one day. She says, the dear Lord took all these people, but he forgot me. But he took her when she was 105 and died on our son Ron Cyril's birthday. Traveling across the United States, there were all kinds of special things for the bicentennial year. And a lot of people, like in Washington, D.C., in their old outfits of 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And we did most of our own cooking. We had an Airstream trailer, pulled by a van.
A full-size 1972 Dodge van,
We visited.
3/4 ton, with a low-geared rear end.
We visited friends and relatives on the way, and then we had an Airstream trailer, and so we could stop at people's homes if they were in the book and call ahead of time and say, we're going to be coming by, is there room? They say yes. We went one place, and this guy had horses, and Joyce jumped on one of
He
the horses.
had a farm. He owned 50,000 acres. He leased 50,000 acres from the government. And this is out of, what's the name of the big drugstore?
Wall drug.
Wall Drug, South Dakota. And they were about 10 miles out of there. And Joyce was, 12, 14 years old. She was the first one he saddled up a horse, and she was the first one to get on. And she rode down about a block and turned around and came back. On the way back, she was cantering, and the farmer asked me, how long has she been riding? I said, this is the first time she's been on a horse. He says she's a natural. She was doing everything just right. And she loves horses.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, on that trip, her most expensive gasoline was bought in Montana, 10 miles away from a refinery. It cost a lot to deliver it from the refinery to the service station.
How much did we pay?
We paid 75 cents a gallon there.
What was the
Oh,
average?
wow.
What was the average price?
Oh, it was around 45.50. We paid 73 cents a gallon in Tonopah, Nevada.
Yeah.
Remember those days, if you made $8,000 a year, you were lucky.
And Auntie Nita was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She turned 10 on the trip. When we left Portland, going south, we were on the old Highway 99 for a while. We took mostly secondary roads. We had been to Portland many times, to Grandma and Grandpa's house and to Arigotti's house, and that was Old Hat. But when we got on the 99 and we were past Oregon City, Auntie Nita says, where are we going? How far is it? And I said, there's a map back there of the United States. And she dug the map out of the file box that we had with our maps in. And she spread the map out. She looked at it for about 10 minutes. And I said, there's a line on there, a blue line, and that's where we're going. She looked at it. She says, that's a long way.
Yeah.
But she was a tour guide. She was a map reader, and she really did a good job. One time, she did such a good job. Grandpa was going to get us lost, and she said, "No, Dad, this is the way." She was right.
She says, you got to turn right. And I said, no, got to turn left. Turned left and went about a mile, and I said, you're right. So we turned around and went back. We were in one of the northern states, and I was traveling 70 miles an hour in a 55 zone and got a ticket. That was the only ticket that we got. Now, we had a very good trip. Now, Grandma says didn't bring anything we didn't need. Not quite so. We had 2 cases of canned goods underneath our bed that we took to the East Coast and back.
We used some of them.
2 cases that were never touched.
And I worried about starving.
I told them we had to keep this one closet. Had a lot of room. Had to keep the one closet empty for things that we would buy. We never filled the closet up, but they never suffered for lack of clothes. We had plenty of clothes. And it was funny, on the trailer, we bought that Airstream trailer, and we could see it right across over here because the fellow who owned it was turning it in and right across the bay. So, okay.
All right.
What is your favorite food that your mother used to make?
Pigs in the blanket. These were a meat, rice, and I don't know what all else went into them, wrapped up in cabbage leaves, and she tucked them in, and she made a whole, a blue canning pot. There was 8 of us in the family. She would make that blue canning pot up to about that far from the top, full, with cabbage, not cabbage, sauerkraut. A layer of sauerkraut, layer of pigs in the blanket, layer of sauerkraut.
That sounds delicious.
And there was rarely any left over. That was one of the favorites that she made. She also made a delicious Spanish rice. You remember that?
Not as much as the other.
The Spanish rice was great.
And she made a nut roll, and she made something, apple, something or other.
Oh,
Strudel, apple strudel.
Oh,
It was wonderful. People loved it.
she made strudel. This table is about 2/3 the size of the table that she used, our kitchen table, and she would take a dough about that size, less than that,
Mm-hmm.
and stretch it out across this table. She put a table,
Yeah.
sheet down,
There was going.
and stretched this out across there, and it was thin
Yeah.
enough that you could read a newspaper through it.
Wow.
And then, after she got it stretched out, she would go around the edge. There was still, maybe the size of half my finger that was all along the edge, and she'd have about half of that left.
Wow.
And then she would sprinkle lard, hot lard on it, and then spices, salt, pepper, some pepper, cinnamon, and a couple other spices, I can't remember what. And then she would put, if she was making cottage cheese one, then she'd sprinkle cottage cheese all over it. Or apples, if she was making apple one, she would slice the apples, and then she'd turn the edges in each side, and then pick up the sheet and roll it, and it would roll down. Now, while she was spreading the hot lard and the cinnamon spices on it, neighbor kid came over, and he went back right away to his mother. The kid was maybe 13 years old. Went back to his mother, and he told her, Mrs. Dranjevic's gone crazy. She's spreading stuff out on the kitchen table, all over the kitchen table. And Mrs. Hoyt knew that she was making strudel, so she explained to him what it was. Because he didn't notice that it had the, it was so even. And there was nobody that I've ever given any to that ever said they had anything better. Go ahead.
Well, my mother wasn't a fancy cook, but she did make good desserts. She made a huge cake, and I think we call it the death cake, because that time someone died, she brought this big cake to us. Well, when someone died, what else would you call the cake? She made orange kiss-me cake. It's an old recipe. It was good. And she made stew, and my dad used to make one thing. He'd make minestrone, and then he made a special salad. But they weren't fancy cooks, but
I've heard about the salad. I've heard it.
yeah,
I've heard about
we
the
had them like
minestrone,
first
too.
cookbook, too.
No
Really?
pancakes.
Oh, I don't remember that hard. He remembered the $40 pancakes my dad made. I hardly remembered.
Saturday mornings, she said that he would make little dollar-sized pancakes for her and her sister.
What's more fun, those animal pancakes. Seemed
Oh,
like
yeah.
the neighbor used to make those for her granddaughter and me.
All right. So tell us a story about your mom and our mom.
Okay,
Both of you.
about your mom. She was about 15 months old. We were living in a rented house on the west side in Bremerton, and she used to love to play with potato bugs. And we had potato bugs over there. And I was outside one day, and I saw her, and she had a bump on her lower lip, and I said, Joyce, open your mouth, and she did. She had a potato bug in her mouth.
That explains a lot.
She wasn't a vegetarian.
Oh, now, we one time were looking all over for her. She was about 3 years old, and we couldn't find her. We called her. We didn't hear anything. Finally, I looked in the bedroom, and she was in bed and asleep. And after that, when she was tired, she would go into bed by herself. She didn't wait for us. She had a standard twin-size bed, and she'd go in and go to sleep. No arguments.
Sleep is important. mountains.